The dining room was dimly lit, the chandelier overhead casting a soft golden glow over the mahogany table. The scent of rosemary chicken still lingered in the air, mingling with the subtle vanilla fragrance of Olivia's perfume. It should have felt warm, familiar. Two people sharing a meal, a conversation, a life. But tonight, something was off. Olivia sat across from me, poised as always, her manicured nails tapping lightly against the stem of her wine glass. Her face was unreadable, lips slightly pursed, as if carefully choosing the words that would change everything. I should have seen it coming. The tension in her shoulders, the flicker in her eyes. I should have noticed. But I was too caught up in routine, too wrapped in the comfort of us. Then she spoke. "I don't need a life with you anymore." The words, sliced through the air, cold, final, merciless. She took a sip of her wine, unfazed, as if she hadn't just torn apart the life we built together. "I've inherited $5 million from my father," she continued. "I don't need you when I have that kind of money." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. I stared, waiting for a smirk, a laugh, something to indicate this was a cruel joke. But Olivia didn't laugh. It wasn't just what she said. That stung. It was how she said it. So casual, so detached. Silence stretched between us. Heavy, suffocating. She was serious. The woman I had loved, supported, sacrificed for. She was sitting across from me, telling me I was obsolete, that my presence in her life was no longer required. I should have been angry. I should have slammed my fist on the table, demanded to know how she could be so heartless. But all I felt was a dull numbness spreading through me. A survival instinct, shutting down anything unnecessary. I studied her. She looked different now. Not the Olivia I met years ago. Not the woman who once held my hand in the dark. This woman was a stranger, cold, calculating, and she thought she had already won. "Is that so?" I said finally, my voice void of emotion. Her smirk deepened. "It is." She expected me to crumble. She thought I'd beg, plead. She had no idea. I leaned back in my chair, taking in the sight of her. The designer dress, the perfect curls, the carefully curated image of a woman stepping into a new life. Had she rehearsed this moment? Giggled over mimosas with her friends, imagining my reaction? Had she been planning this for weeks, months? Had she already started seeing someone else? Still, I gave her nothing. "Fine." One word, no fight, no argument. Her smirk faltered, just slightly. "That's it?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "No protest? No, how could you, Olivia?" I shrugged, lifting my water glass to my lips. "You've made your choice. I'm not going to beg to stay where I'm not wanted." A flicker of something crossed her eyes. Surprise? Uncertainty? She masked it quickly. "Well, that was easier than I thought," she said lightly, leaning back. "Guess I was worried over nothing." She thought she had the upper hand. But Olivia didn't know the truth. That $5 million. It wasn't what she thought it was. I had seen the documents weeks ago. I knew the real terms of her inheritance, the hidden debts, the fine print she had conveniently ignored. She thought she was walking into freedom, into a life of luxury, but she was stepping straight into quicksand, and I wasn't going to save her. I took another sip of water, my expression calm, controlled. "I hope it brings you happiness, Olivia." She tilted her head, studying me. Maybe part of her sensed something was off, but greed blinded her. She was too drunk on the thrill of her so-called victory to notice. "Oh, it will," she said confidently. "You'll see." I doubted it, but I said nothing. I simply stood, collected my plate, and walked to the kitchen. Behind me, Olivia sighed, the sound of relief unmistakable. She had gotten what she wanted. Or so she thought. The shift. It didn't take long for things to change. Subtle at first. Small things. She treated the house like a temporary stop rather than a home. Left dishes in the sink without a second thought. Barely spoke to me unless necessary, and when she did, her words were laced with irritation. Then came the complaints. Why is the living room so dusty? Have you always been this careless in the kitchen? That one stung. I had always cooked. Olivia barely knew how to boil rice when we first married, and I never minded being the one making meals. But now, my cooking was careless. It wasn't about the food or the dust. She was convincing herself that leaving me was the right decision. That I was the problem. I stayed quiet. Let her have her passive-aggressive remarks, because I knew what she didn't. She thought she was in control. She had no idea. Then one night, it became crystal clear. Olivia came home late. 3 hours. Later than she'd said. I might not have noticed if it weren't for the scent clinging to her. Not vanilla, not jasmine. A man's. I had seen the documents weeks ago. I knew the real terms of her inheritance, the hidden debts, the fine print she had conveniently ignored. She thought she was walking into freedom, into a life of luxury, but she was stepping straight into quicksand, and I wasn't going to save her. I took another sip of water, my expression calm, controlled. I hope it brings you happiness, Olivia. She tilted her head, studying me. Maybe part of her sensed something was off. But greed blinded her. She was too drunk on the thrill of her so-called victory to notice. Oh, it will, she said confidently. You'll see. I doubted it, but I said nothing. I simply stood, collected my plate, and walked to the kitchen. Behind me, Olivia sighed, the sound of relief unmistakable. She had gotten what she wanted, or so she thought. That a shift it didn't take long for things to change. Subtle at first. Small things. She treated the house like a temporary stop rather than a home. Left dishes in the sink without a second thought. Barely spoke to me unless necessary, and when she did, her words were laced with irritation. Then came the complaints. Why is the living room so dusty? Have you always been this careless in the kitchen? That one stung. I had always cooked. Olivia barely knew how to boil rice when we first married, and I never minded being the one making meals. But now, my cooking was careless. It wasn't about the food or the dust. She was convincing herself that leaving me was the right decision, that I was the problem. I stayed quiet. Let her have her passive-aggressive remarks, because I knew what she didn't. She thought she was in control. She had no idea. Then one night, it became crystal clear. Olivia came home late. 3 hours, later than she'd said. I might not have noticed, if it weren't for the scent clinging to her. Not vanilla, not jasmine. A man's cologne. Expensive, masculine, unmistakable. She walked past me without a word, heading straight to the bedroom. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. She wanted out, but she didn't have the courage to end things the right way. No, Olivia wanted to rewrite history. She wanted to paint me as the problem, to leave without guilt. So I let her play her little games, watched as she came home later, dressed bolder, laughed at texts from someone who wasn't me. Then, one night at dinner, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, smirked, and answered. Hey, you! She didn't step away for privacy. She sat there, right across from me, twirling a strand of hair around her finger, voice dripping with flirtation. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. I set my fork down, not with jealousy, but with amusement. She really thought she had won. Who was that? I asked, pretending I didn't already know. She tilted her head. Just a friend. I chuckled, nodded. A friend. Right. She smirked, pushing her plate aside. You don't have to pretend, you know. Oh, Olivia. She had no idea. I had already found out everything. His name, his workplace, his history. I knew exactly what kind of man Logan was, and she was walking straight into a disaster. But I wasn't going to stop her. Let her believe. She had won. Because soon, reality would hit. And when it did, I wouldn't be there to catch her. She thought she won. She had no idea what was coming. We both knew what was happening here. Olivia had moved on, and she expected me to do the same. But this wasn't about moving on. This was a test, a game to see if I would crack. "I see," I said simply. That annoyed her. She wanted a fight. She wanted me to break, to demand answers, to lash out so she could justify her actions. But I wasn't giving her the satisfaction. That night, as she slept beside me in the bed we had once shared as husband and wife, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I knew what I had to do. Olivia thought she was playing me, but she was playing herself. And soon, she would find out just how big of a mistake she had made. The divorce papers. A week after making it clear that she had moved on, Olivia handed me divorce papers as casually as if she were passing over a grocery receipt. It was a quiet afternoon. I was in the study going through some documents when she walked in holding a sleek black folder. She paused in the doorway, watching me. I didn't acknowledge her at first, keeping my focus on the papers in front of me. I could feel her impatience growing with every passing second. Finally, she cleared her throat. "I have something for you." I set my pen down and looked up. She stepped forward, placing the folder on my desk with an air of finality. "Let's make this quick," she said, arms crossed. "You get $250,000 as a settlement. More than fair if you ask me." She waited for my reaction, expecting resistance, maybe even a bitter argument. I gave her none. Instead, I opened the folder and skimmed through the neatly typed pages. Her terms, her expectations, her way of cutting me out of. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You're not even going to read it properly." "I don't need to." I flipped to the last page and signed my name without hesitation. The moment my pen lifted from the paper, Olivia's expression faltered. She had been prepared for a fight, for anger, for a desperate plea. But I had given her none of that. Instead, I met her gaze, my voice calm. "I'll sell the house and be out in a week." A flicker of surprise crossed her face before she quickly masked it with smug satisfaction. "Good," she said. "I'm glad we can be mature about this." She turned on her heel and walked out, her heels clicking against the floor. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. It was done. At least, she thought it was. What Olivia didn't know, what she never even bothered to check, was that the $5 million inheritance she thought had set her free was a trap she had walked into with her eyes closed. She thought she was leaving me behind, but soon enough she would realize she had made the biggest mistake of her life. And there wouldn't be a damn thing she could do to fix it. The day I left. The day I moved out was the day Olivia finally got what she thought she wanted. She stood by the front door as I carried the last of my belongings to the car, arms folded across her chest. She had dressed up for the occasion, tight black dress, makeup perfectly done, hair styled in those expensive waves she always loved. She wanted to look victorious. I had seen that look before. In corporate meetings, in negotiations where people thought they had outsmarted the other party. Olivia believed she had won, and in that moment, I let her think she had. I shut the trunk and walked back up the driveway. She didn't say a word as I pulled the house keys from my pocket and placed them in her open palm. "It's all yours now," I said simply. Her fingers closed around the keys, her lips curving into a smug smile. "That wasn't so hard, was it?" I met her gaze, calm and steady. "No, Olivia, it wasn't." For a brief second, something flickered in her eyes. Doubt, maybe. A sliver of hesitation. But she quickly buried it, stepping back as I turned toward my car. I didn't look back as I drove away. That house, that life, that version of myself, I was leaving it all behind. And Olivia, she was stepping into the world she had chosen, a world that, soon enough, would collapse around her. The rise and fall of Olivia's new life. Barely a week after I left, Olivia wasted no time flaunting her newfound reality. Her social media was filled with pictures of lavish dinners, designer shopping bags, and extravagant vacations. Logan was by her side in almost every picture. First-class flights to Paris, champagne in five-star hotels, selfies at exclusive rooftop parties. She had everything she wanted, or so she thought. But even through the carefully curated images, I could see it. Something was off. Her smile wasn't the same. She had always been good at faking happiness for the world, but I had spent too many years by her side not to recognize the cracks forming beneath the surface, and I knew exactly why. She had no idea what was coming. The first signs of trouble. A month after our divorce was finalized, my phone rang at 2 a.m. I was in my new apartment, a much smaller but more peaceful space, when I glanced at the screen and smirked. Olivia. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello. There was silence on the other end, then a shaky breath. I need to see you, she whispered. I leaned back against the headboard, unsurprised. That's interesting, I mused. I thought you didn't need me anymore. A pause. Then, please. I took my time before answering. Where are you? She gave me the address of a cafe we used to visit when we were first married, back when money was tight and our biggest splurges were late-night coffee dates. The irony wasn't lost on me. When I arrived, I almost didn't recognize her. Her once polished appearance was disheveled, hair slightly unkempt, dark circles under her eyes, makeup smudged. The designer dress she once wore with confidence now hung off her as if she had lost weight too quickly. But it wasn't just her physical state, it was the way she looked at me. Not with arrogance, not with superiority, with fear. I slid into the seat across from her. You look terrible, Olivia. She flinched. Logan left me. I didn't react. Her jaw clenched. He drained my accounts, every single one. Ah, there it was, the final, inevitable consequence of her greed. She had never bothered to look beyond Logan's charm to see the con artist underneath. But I had. And now, she was left with nothing. She swallowed hard. What do I do? I let the silence hang between us before standing. That's not my problem anymore, Olivia. Her eyes widened in panic. Wait! But I was already walking away. She had made her choice. Now, she would have to live with it. I leaned back in my chair, letting the sound of her desperation settle. She sniffled, and for the first time in years, I realized she was crying. Everything is gone, she said, her voice trembling. Logan. He drained my accounts, maxed out my credit cards. He left the country, and now the debt collectors are threatening to take my house. I smirked. I had been waiting for this moment. I thought you didn't need me, Olivia. She let out a choked sob. I know, I was wrong. I was so stupid. I didn't see it. I didn't think. You didn't think, I interrupted smoothly. That's exactly it. You were so busy believing you had outgrown me, so convinced that money could replace loyalty, love, and commitment. And now, here you are, alone, broke, afraid. She sucked in a sharp breath, silent for a moment, before whispering the words I knew were coming. Can we meet? I let the silence stretch long enough for her to start panicking before finally answering. Fine, one last time. I agreed to meet Olivia at a quiet park outside the city, neutral ground. When I arrived, I almost didn't recognize her. She was a shadow of the woman she had once been. Her once glowing skin was pale and dull. The designer clothes she had always flaunted now hung off her like they didn't belong. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and for the first time Olivia looked defeated. She had always carried herself with confidence, with a superiority that made people believe she had the world at her feet. But now she looked like someone chewed up and spit out by life itself. She saw me approaching and straightened her posture, trying to compose herself, but she couldn't hide the way her hands trembled as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You came?" she said softly. I shrugged. Curiosity, mostly. At first I thought I had imagined it, but then it came again, louder, more desperate. I sighed, rubbing my face before swinging my legs over the bed. I considered ignoring it. Nothing good ever came from someone showing up at your doorstep, in the middle of the night. But something told me this was the last time she would ever come. So I got up, walked to the front door, pulled it open, and there she was, a wreck of the woman she used to be. Her hair was tangled from the wind, her makeup smudged as if she had been crying for hours. She was wearing an oversized hoodie, one I recognized as mine from years ago. It swallowed her frame, making her look even smaller, more fragile. She looked up at me with wide, red-rimmed eyes. "Please," she whispered. I stared at her. This was it. This was rock bottom. "What do you want, Olivia?" She let out a shaky breath. I don't know where else to go. And yet, I knew the truth. She had burned every bridge, pushed away everyone who had ever cared about her. She was terrified, but I owed her nothing. I took a step back, closing the door between us. "You still don't need me, Olivia." The door latched shut, and for the first time in years I felt free. I picked up old hobbies, reconnected with friends I had lost touch with, and started going to the gym again. I wasn't just moving on, I was thriving. And Olivia? She was disappearing. It started with her social media. She used to post constantly, showing off her perfect life, but now the pictures of luxury, vacations, and her and Logan were gone. She had deleted everything. Then I stopped hearing about her altogether. No one knew where she was or what she was doing. It was like she had vanished. And honestly, I didn't care. For the first time in years, Olivia was no longer a part of my world, and it felt damn good. One evening, as I was walking home, I saw something that made me stop in my tracks. A homeless woman sitting on a bench near a gas station, staring blankly at the ground. Her clothes were dirty, her hair tangled, her entire presence unrecognizable. But I knew who she was. Olivia. My chest tightened, but not with pity, with finality. This was the end of her road. She had gambled everything, thrown away the life we had built together for money and lust, and she had lost. She must have felt my stare because she looked up. When she saw me, her face paled. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, slowly, she stood up, her hands trembling. "I didn't know where else to go," she murmured. Her voice was weak, her posture hunched. She was not the same woman who had handed me divorce papers with a smirk on her lips. She was a woman who had lost everything. I exhaled. "You did this to yourself, Olivia." Her lips trembled. "I know." She wiped at her eyes, shaking her head. "I thought I had it all figured out. I thought money would make me happy." I nodded. "And now?" She let out a shaky breath. "Now I don't even know who I am anymore." I should have felt pity, but I didn't. I felt nothing. She was just another stranger now. "Good luck, Olivia," I said finally. And with that, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. Not this time, not ever again. I never looked back after that night. For years, Olivia had been a central part of my life, But as I walked away from her for the last time, I realized just how much space she had taken up in my mind. Space that was finally free. I wasn't bitter, I wasn't angry, I was just done. The man I had been before, the one who would have done anything for her, who had stayed up at night wondering why he wasn't enough, was gone. And in his place was someone stronger, someone who had learned the hard way that love isn't always enough. I had finally let go. And now, it was time to start over. The first thing I did was stop dwelling on the past. I found a new apartment. One that wasn't filled with memories of her. I reconnected with friends, traveled, explored, and lived for myself. I hiked through mountains, sat on quiet beaches, and wandered cities where no one knew my name. And slowly, the scars Olivia had left behind began to fade. One evening, I was at a coffee shop reading a book when someone caught my attention. She sat across the room, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, a notebook open in front of her. She scribbled furiously, completely absorbed in whatever she was writing. I wasn't looking for anything serious, but for the first time in a long time, I felt curious. I took a deep breath and walked over. "Mind if I sit here?" She looked up, surprised, then smiled. "Go ahead." Just like that, a new chapter began. Her name was Sophia. She was nothing like Olivia. Where Olivia had been calculated, Sophia was genuine. Where Olivia had been obsessed with status, Sophia cared about experiences and moments. She made me laugh in ways I hadn't in years. She challenged me, pushed me to see the world differently. With her, I wasn't being evaluated. I was simply existing. And that was enough. We took things slow. But the more I got to know her, the more I realized something. I had spent so long believing that love had to be difficult, that it was a constant battle of proving your worth, of holding on, even when it hurt. But with Sophia, it was easy. It was effortless. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be truly seen. One night, as we sat on my couch, a movie playing in the background, Sophia turned to me. "Do you ever think about her?" she asked. I knew who she meant. I thought about my answer carefully. "I used to," I admitted. "But not anymore." She studied me for a moment. "Are you happy?" I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yeah," I said softly. "I am." And for the first time in years, I meant it. Months passed, and Olivia became nothing more than a distant memory. The betrayal, the pain, it had all faded into the past. I had moved on. I had built a new life. And for the first time in years, I was at peace. Sophia and I were growing closer. She had a way of making me feel present, of reminding me that life wasn't about holding on to pain, but about embracing what was in front of me. With her, I felt light. I wasn't the broken man Olivia had left behind. I was stronger, happier. And nothing, not even the ghost of my past, could take that away. Or so I thought. One evening, Sophia and I were at a cozy restaurant by the river. It was one of those nights that felt perfect, like something out of a dream. We had just finished our meal when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't check it, but something told me I should. When I did, my stomach twisted. Olivia. It had been months since I'd last seen her, since I'd closed the door on her and walked away without looking back. And now she was reaching out. Sophia noticed the shift in my expression. "Everything okay?" I hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, just an old number I wasn't expecting to see." She didn't push. That was something I appreciated about her. She didn't pry, didn't demand answers I wasn't ready to give. I stared at the screen for a long moment before finally opening the message. It was short, desperate. "I need to see you, please." I sighed. No context, no explanation. But I didn't need one. I already knew. She had finally hit rock bottom, and as much as I had sworn I was done with her, a part of me, not out of love, not out of regret, but out of curiosity, needed to see just how far she had fallen. So, against my better judgment, I replied, "Where?"